Yes, hello again and welcome back to another episode of Classic Dirt Bike TV, where we rediscover some more of those classic vintage and evolution motocross machines from back in the day. Now, once again, thanks to all the brand new subscribers who have recently signed up to my channel since my last video posting. It takes us quite nicely to almost 15,000 subscribers for my channel. So again, thanks very much for your commitment and support of my YouTube channel. Okay, coming up next, we're going to take a look at a bike from 1987. Now, this particular YZ490 Yamaha is not your run-of-the-mill monoshock machine. This particular bike here has been converted to be used as a twin shock racer. Now, many of you YZ490 fans out there that love your monoshock Yamahas might not take too kindly to what's been done to this particular bike, but nonetheless it's still a lovely looking machine. So without any further delay, let's jump straight into the video and take a look at Billy Pentland's 1987 YZ490 Yamaha Twinshocker. Okay, so as I said, this featured YZ490 is not your stock monoshock motocross racer from 1987, because this bike here has undergone a bit of a transformation to convert it from what was an Evolution single monoshock motocrosser to a bike that could be used and that is eligible for use as a twin shock scrambles machine. Now, the bike's owner, Billy Pentland, originally got the idea to build this bike when he saw a picture of a similar YZ Yamaha that was also converted from a more modern monoshock configuration to a twin shock race bike for legendary racer Martin Snape. Now, Billy already had an old battered 1987 water-cooled YZ250 bike that had seen much better days, so Billy's plan was to use the 250's frame and swing arm as the basis for his new project. And after the old bike was completely dismantled, Billy would then sell off the parts that he didn't need to help finance the build of this new bike. Now, with regards all of the engineering involved of chopping up the frame to take a bigger YZ490 motor and then realigning and welding the swing arm, Billy was going to do all of this work himself. And although he'd never really attempted anything quite like this in the past, he had all of the tools to complete the project and hopefully the know-how as well. Now, the first thing to do was to strip the frame down to its bare bones and then inspect it for any signs of damage or breakages, and then some refabrication work took place to make sure that that YZ490 air-cooled motor would then fit snugly into the chassis. Now, new rear shock mounting pins were then welded in place, and a few mounting lugs were also added to take the bike's brand new side panels. Now, in these pictures here, you can see the finished frame after it's just been painted and with all of its brand new fabrication work all completed. But to get the rear twin shock part of the chassis right, Billy took measurements from a friend's 1981 490 Michael so that he could get the twin shock mount points correct for the new suspension that was going to be fitted. Although essentially Billy was very happy and a little relieved that this part of the project was now completed. Now, when it came to fitting the bigger YZ490 motor, thankfully Billy's handiwork all worked out just perfectly, and the big air-cooled YZ490 power plant was a nice snug fit into that brand new chassis. Although I'm sure that you already know how powerful these YZ490 motors are, although they did have a bit of a reputation back in the day for pinking and being quite hard to start, and one or two other little niggles. But if you took your time to set these motors up with regards ignition timing and jetting, then these were still rocket ships on two wheels. But one of the other modifications that Billy had to make was to refabricate this new alloy carburetor intake, as the original was angled to pass by what was the Yamaha single monoshock that would have been fitted to this particular frame. But a decent Mikuni carburetor again is used to feed that motor with its fuel, and quite a nice alloy airbox was also made to take the foam type air filter. But it's still suffice to say that this 490 engine did undergo a full strip down and rebuild before being slotted into this new frame, and you can rest assured that this bike, powered by that brute of a 490 motor, will have more than enough power to keep up with any machine in the Twinshock open class. Now, as you'd expect, more adjustments had to be made to the motor's exhaust expansion chamber, and this had to undergo some realignment to allow it to slip past that new alloy airbox that Billy had fitted to the frame. And although it was all quite a snug fit behind that right hand side panel, it still had enough clearance to avoid hitting both the frame and that alloy airbox. And once more, the expansion chamber exhaust system is finished off by fitting this alloy rear tailpipe, and we'll be able to get a chance to hear what kind of brap comes out of this tailpipe sometime later in this video. And so as we move on to the bike's front suspension, now this is more or less just a complete front end taken from a donor 87 YZ490 bike, and these forks came complete with the YZ front wheel hub and front brake. But as I remember, these Yamaha forks on these 87s bikes weren't the worst ever fitted to an 80s motocrosser, and if they were set up correctly with regards rebound and damping, they did do a decent job on the racetrack. And again, you can see here that we still had old school drum stoppers on the 87 bikes, which again were pretty good considering that these were still the old antiquated drum brake systems. Now at the back of the bike, the same style 1987 rear wheel and drum brake hub with that exotic magnesium brake backplate, which was one of those lightweight materials that were used on these 80s machines back in the day. Although essentially both the front and rear brakes on this 490 were still more than capable of slowing the bike down if you wanted to make a quick turn or maybe bring it to a stop. And so as we move on to the real purpose of this bike, and that was to convert it into a Twinshock race bike, and normally this alloy swing arm here from the 1987 YZ250 water-cooled bike would have been straight originally, so Billy had to then cut the swing arm and then re-angle it and add a pair of suspension hangers to enable him to bolt on a set of Twinshock suspension units on either side. Now, just to make it clear here that Billy would be the very first person to admit that his engineering skills and welding are maybe not the best, although as this was the very first time that Billy attempted anything as major as this, he's still quite happy with the way it's all worked out. And Billy's actually been racing this bike for a few years now, and there's been no reports of any cracking or breakages with his welding or fabrication work. And so as we move on to the bike's rear suspension now, the rear piggyback shocks that Billy chose to fit onto that redesigned alloy swing arm are a quality pair of RPM suspension units from Wolfsport man Bill Brown. Now these RPM piggyback shocks are made exclusively for Wolfsport, and I do know personally a few riders who use these suspension units, and the feedback has been pretty good. And of course the other plus point here is that these RPM shocks are all fully tunable and rebuildable as well. Now once again, the bike's fuel tank is a stock YZ490 plastic item that Billy sourced from his supply of YZ bits and pieces, and this basically just required a quick wash and brush up, and then a new set of YZ490 tank graphics were then purchased from Alan Reed at MXM Graphics, which were then fitted onto either side of this fuel tank. Now once more, Billy used an original YZ490 seat base and foam, and then refitted it with a brand new seat cover just to keep the bike looking fresh after its brand new refurbishment. Now one of the things that Billy had to do with the brand new frame was to weld a pair of lugs onto the chassis to take these new side panels, which have been taken from a 490 Maiko, and they certainly don't look out of place on this Japanese YZ machine. But again, these nice snazzy Yamaha graphics were all supplied by Alan Reed at MXM Graphics, who are actually quite a good contact if you need any personalised graphics done for your off-road racer. And here at the business end of the bike, a decent set of Renthal bars with alloy Magura levers, and quite a good Gunnar Gasser throttle there to try and control the horses from that 490 motor. But as we move to the clutch side, you can see evidence here of some mud on that lever, and I think that was because, as I remember, I think the bike fell over on this side when we were taking the pictures, but thankfully for me, no damage was actually done to the bike other than it making just a small hole in the soft grass and maybe picking up some mud on that clutch lever. Now for me personally, I still think that this is a cracking looking bike, and I know that all of you YZ Yamaha monoshock lovers out there will be sitting shaking their heads in disbelief as to why anybody would want to convert a perfectly good Evolution monoshock racer to an older Twinshock bike. Although I think it was really a combination of the inspiration that Billy got from looking at that Martin Snape Yamaha Twinshocker, and the fact that he already had a scrap YZ250 water-cooled bike that was going to need a ton of money spent on it to get it back on the track. So he just then decided to create something a bit more unusual with that stock of parts. Now I also know that there's a certain percentage of my YouTubers out there who just have to have all of their old race bikes with their original parts still fitted right down to the last nut, bolt and screw, and I must admit it's great to still have 100% original machines from back in the day still in their stock condition. But who am I to judge anybody about what they do with their spare time? And the single most important fact here is that Billy's built this bike as an everyday race machine to use each and every weekend. And because this was his very first attempt at building a hybrid racer, then you've just got to compliment the guy on his achievements. And in this shot here you can see the proud owner himself and the builder of this bike, Billy Pentland, who looks suitably chuffed with his brand new creation. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the machine. Now let's get Billy to fire up that 490 motor and have a quick listen to what it sounds like. So there you have it, another nice bike from Classic Dirt Bike TV. That's Billy Pentland's 1987 YZ490 Yamaha Twinshock conversion. But thanks again for joining me here, and I do hope you'll retune to my channel to check out more of these old classics. So until then, it's bye for now, and I'll see you soon.